All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the very first online event Where Next is doing. So thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon and evening. We have two really amazing guests to talk about, I think, a really important topic that doesn't get enough love and attention, especially when you're just starting out your career. So I want to introduce our guests quickly, and then we'll talk about a little logistics before we get going. Both of our guests are joining us from New York City. They're together. We have Mariam Guessous. She's a creative entrepreneur, creative director, and founder of ICU Wellness, which is a wellness platform that exists to empower communities of color through accessible wellness and radical self-care. After spending years in the ad agency world, she left in 2017 to pursue her passion for bringing change to communities in the ad industry and beyond. Thank you so much for being here, Mariam.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you all for tuning in from all over the country so far. And I think somebody from India earlier said that they were going to tune in, but thank you all for having me. I'm excited to speak about a topic that I deeply care about and that is definitely not talked about enough. So I hope that you all can get some tips and strategies about how to move forward with your career.
Yeah. So next we have Jocelyn Lai. She's the founder of JSL Talent Consulting. Jocelyn successfully restructured and scaled organizations and teams at several ad agencies in the US and Asia Pacific before starting JSL Talent Consulting, which handles all things talent for creative organizations. Thanks, Jocelyn, for being part of the conversation.
Of course. And thanks everyone, like ditto basically to Mariam. But I just also want to put out there, we're going to be super vulnerable today. So I hope that everyone can. That's the only way that we can all kind of benefit from each other.
Absolutely.
Totally.
So we're also going to keep it real.
Yes, definitely. No holding back. So we're a couple quick notes before we jump into our conversation. So I'm going to be facilitating the convo with Jocelyn and Mariam for the first portion, and then we're going to open it up to answer your questions and hear some of your experiences as well. So you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, if you have a question, you can click the Ask a Question tab and submit it. It's pretty easy. And if you go into that tab, you can upvote other people's questions. So if there's something that you see that you really want to know, definitely upvote it. And then we'll answer in order of, how many people want to know the answer to that question. So also along the way, I'll prompt, as people are speaking, prompt certain things and questions for you guys, like in the chat, so you guys can keep it going there, and we'll read out some of the things that are shared there too. Okay, so let's jump into it. I wanted to start with the basics. So I wanted to ask both of you how you would describe the ideal state of mental health and wellness in a creative industry like advertising. Like, what does that look like? What does it feel like? What should we be aiming for? Whoever wants to start, go for it.
Sure. Wait, you or me? Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll start. So to me, when I thought about this question, it's well-being and mental health comes down to safety and feeling safe in your body, feeling safe at work, feeling safe in the world. This goes beyond just the industry, but feeling safe in that environment that you're in. And so that's what it comes down to. If you feel safe, if you feel like you can show up and be yourself without having to hold back, without having to try to fit into a box that somebody's trying to put you in, then that's kind of like the ideal state where you can just come in and be relaxed and be yourself and be able to express yourself with certain freedom, but also being able to be heard from the others at the agency, and that takes two, to make it happen. But to me, that's the ideal state, is feeling safe when you show up to work, to do your work and be yourself fully, completely, and unapologetically.
Yeah, and usually when it comes to like any sort of definitions, I usually flip it on what is it not. And I think we can probably all easily identify that. So what is not mental health or mental healthiness? It's being afraid at your job, feeling fearful, feeling like someone's going to stab you in the back, feeling like you're dreading waking up, going to work, dragging yourself to work. That's not mental healthiness. On the flip side, Mariam and I were talking about this a little bit before, we oftentimes see in the media and social media, like hashtag mental health, and you see these people laying out on the beach. So we think that mental health is always being happy. So this constant state of elation, which actually is not healthy either, because it's actually an extreme. So one extreme or the other is also not healthy. What I have found recently is mental health is actually being even keeled. You can have a shitty day, you can have an awesome day, but it doesn't mean that you're going to always be one extreme or the other consistently. And for me, what really works is also understanding what is enough. So mental health comes with knowing when is work enough. How can work be enough? On the flip side with physical items, shoes, I love shoes. When is it enough shoes? How can I get enough shoes? That's important too. We have to be satisfied. So understanding your definition of enough is also key to understanding what your definition of mental health is, because it's going to be different for each individual.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
and also I would,
sorry, go ahead, Mariam.
Okay, I was just going to offer one more thing about taking care of your mental health. Like when you feel it starting to deteriorate, it's not really a time to be like, okay, who did this to me? It's really a time for you to be like, what have I not given to myself? And that's something that took me a while to understand and to get. But as a junior, we always like, well, the agency is not giving me this, the agency is not doing this, but we know that the agencies are not there yet, and they are functioning in an old system. So as juniors coming into this industry, you have to know your boundaries, like you said, what's enough, and you kind of have to enforce it and give yourself what you need to avoid going into a burnout or whatnot. So if you feel like your mental health is deteriorating, ask yourself, how have you neglected yourself, and how have you opened up your boundaries too much so that you have nothing else to give?
Yeah, I think it's important to what Jocelyn was saying, like it's just to have realistic expectations of what it means to be in like a healthy mental state and feel like you're at your best in terms of well-being, because that might not look like this like really rosy picture that we see on Instagram. And Mariam, to your point, like really almost like taking responsibility or being more self-aware and reflective about like the role that you are playing in your own mental health and wellness. And I'm sure we'll talk about boundaries and like all that good stuff, but even just knowing like what you need on an individual level, I think it is a really important thing to keep in mind as we think about like, okay, this is the base level of what we should be aiming for. Okay, now how do we address the times when that's challenged? Speaking of which, my next question is about situations you've encountered in your career that challenged your mental health in some way. Can you each describe the situation, how it made you feel, and ultimately how you moved past it and resolved it? Maybe we can start with Jocelyn this time.
Sure. So I feel like I've been very lucky to have terrible situations. But I've learned from all of them, and they've actually helped me become stronger as a woman and a working professional. So I've had the terrible bosses. I felt like I was a pawn. I was the deliverer of bad news. I was taken advantage of. All of that kind of negative stuff I've experienced. I think we all will at a certain point. The common thread between all of those bad experiences is it was anxiety ridden. I was afraid of walking into work. I was afraid of losing my job. I was afraid of whether or not I was valued, which culturally to me, it was like a big, like, oh no moment of who am I? And so I tried a few different things. I tried quitting. That didn't solve it long term. I tried quitting. I tried switching on to different projects. I tried switching teams. That didn't ultimately solve it either. And what I found is more of the long-term piece and actually preserve some more self-respect for myself is to have open conversations with my supervisor about how I'm feeling. And it's good practice, and I actually think that it's good exercise for the manager, him or herself too, to say, oh my goodness, my employee feels like he or she is getting taken advantage of. I need to help with them. So I found that what helped long-term with my resolutions is setting that expectation up front with my supervisor of, here are my passions, here's what really drives me. I am looking to you as my supervisor to help me get there, but these are the barriers that are in my way. And in standing up for myself, I feel much more empowered and I feel much more confident and I don't question my own value. So those are my experiences. I can name more negative ones, but we'll stay positive.
I mean, I've had definitely a whole array of what I can only call like crazy experiences. They're neither good or bad. They were just what they were. It actually says more about the industry and the person than it says about me. But two of experiences that affected me the most was one, because I'm a creative. The idea that you have to work long hours to deliver good work, it just does not click with me. Because if you think about it, are you going to create better work when you're, open, you're feeling good about yourself, you're well rested, you're creative, or when you're sitting at 11 p.m. scared to lose your job, eating Thai food and trying to create ads? It just doesn't make any sense. So that was a hard one for me. And the second one was receiving feedback from what I can only describe as insecure superiors. It was personal feedback too. It wasn't like work-related feedback. And this is something that I found based on my research that I did, that a lot of people of color deal with more than the others. And I'm not sure why, but it becomes personal, right? It becomes not about your work, it becomes about you. So what I did, I felt devalued, and I felt like the work that I was contributing, even though I was doing what they wanted, which is stay late and deliver work and all that, I was devalued, yet I was still criticized for being myself, not necessarily for my work. So that was difficult for me, and of course it like led to a burnout and all kinds of stuff. But the way I resolved it was to really look at myself and decide, do I accept these things that they're telling me, or do I simply just reject them because I know who I am and I know what I can deliver, and moving forward, I'm going to do my work in half the time that everyone decides to do it, but I'm going to leave at this point because I need to go to therapy, or I need to go to yoga to keep myself in check, and I need to do. So the second I started advocating for myself and just bringing up these issues and these things, before I would just let them tell me things, and I would just internalize them and make it about me. But whenever I hear a comment that's personal, I kind of put it back, like, what makes you say this, or like I request a meeting with them, like, hey, you said this and this and this is not work related, where is this coming from? I would just advocate for myself and speak up, and that's something that we are taught as juniors. Well, I'm no longer junior, but as when I was a junior, that you just kind of obey. And that's old paradigm. We're not here to obey. We're here to contribute our creativity. And so in order to do so, we have to feel like we can express ourselves. So start by expressing those things to your supervisor, to your creative director, and just tell them, I'm not okay with this. So let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Opening up that discussion might be you might be helping not only you, but so many other people in your team that are still afraid to speak up. So someone has to do it, and I hope that you can all do it.
And it is so important to set those expectations before you start a job, because they have to hire you also for your values and your priorities. And if you don't set that up, usually, from my experience, typically my burnouts have all been self-inflicted. So my first burnout was I was at this place who treated me so well. They said, you're awesome, gave me a salary increase, gave me spot bonuses. And because of that, I suddenly felt like I owed my life to them. So I was like, oh my goodness, I need to work more 80-hour weeks. And that led to burnout. But that was me thinking I owed the company something. And then the second one was they essentially took advantage of how much I was able to carry on relationships internally at the agency, and said, all right, you're going to have to deal with all this terrible stuff. And no one else is going to do it, when it really wasn't my pay grade to do it. But I wish in that situation I had said, okay, this is what I've been hired to do. Here are my expectations of what is going to keep me healthy. And here's what's not going to keep me healthy. But I had never set those expectations up front. So
it's interesting you said that, Jocelyn, because a lot of juniors do feel, and also it's not by accident, because that's how it's designed to be. Like, when you get a job, you should be grateful. You should be so grateful. And like, in a way, it's like, sure. But at the same time, it's like, but I'm also contributing. This isn't a charity type of situation. You're getting paid to be creative. And in order for you to be creative, you have to be yourself. And so you always have to come back. Can I be myself? Am I safe? If I'm not, then I can talk about it, advocate for myself, or I can make a move, because that's what you need. That's what's in your contract, is to bring your creativity. If you're unable to do that, then that's just festers all kinds of negative things that is easily remedied if you can just speak up and remove that idea from your mind that you should be grateful. It's an exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I think like this whole
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think this whole mentality of gratefulness comes from, there's so much rejection in the ad industry. And sometimes, actually, usually we see rejection as a negative thing, but it's actually a positive thing, right? You look at all these dates you go on, thank goodness that person rejected you, because it wasn't going to work out anyway. Like, it's a relationship, it's not one way. But I do think a lot of this great, like, you should be grateful for your job, comes from rejection.
Right. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think also like telling people that it is valid, like the way that you feel about the work that you're doing. You know what I mean? Like there's so much about like doing your job well, and that's all true, and wanting to make a good impression, improve yourself, especially as junior talent. But I think the way that you feel like as you're doing that says a lot and impacts your work a lot. So not sort of tamping down what you're feeling and being able to communicate it a little bit more to your superiors, just so that they're aware. And again, like you're setting your own expectations, like Jocelyn was saying, and of course you're not going and saying like I'm quitting or whatever, but just like giving them a chance along the way to react to the way that you're feeling because of the environment, because of the situation you're in. Speaking of junior talent level people, what are some things that you didn't realize was going to weigh on you until you started like really working in the industry? Just like some things that you didn't see coming that were challenging to you.
The long hours, the long hours, and the level of, I'm gonna try to choose my words. I want to say like ignorance in a way about just humanity. The level of humanity was like lacking for me. I was like, why is everybody just inhumane in a way, the way they treat each other, the way they talk to each other, and it may be just because of the place that I was at. So I don't know if this is a universal thing, but to me it was like the inhumane treatment of employees in general, specifically juniors, specifically women, specifically people of color. It was just so stark, because as I walked in, I'm like, oh, I'm just here to create, and then I had to deal with all these new things that were not even in my radar.
Right.
So it was like, well, I can't create because I have to get through this treatment and I have to get through this and this and this in order for me to create. So those were invisible obstacles that we don't talk about. You don't know that they're coming until you step into this toxic environment that is not designed for humanity. And I don't think that it's because people are not nice. Mm-hmm. I think everybody is great, everybody is nice, but the system itself is not designed for us to all like grow and be together and work together. It's designed for competition or for like hierarchy. And that's what makes people play in this game, that makes them do inhumane things that they may not even realize. So for me, it was very like, wow, this is the wild, wild west. And I don't know how I can navigate this craziness, because it's not even human anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What shocked me going into the workforce, so I studied advertising, and then I started on the business side and then switched into recruiting, was the amount of street smarts that we have to know, but that's not taught in the academic setting. And then the other piece is, what was it we were talking about?
The way you treat people.
Oh, the type of work. So,
yes.
So I mean, going to school, we're all taught if you're going to be a creative director, you're going to sell in this work, you're going to rebrand this client, and that's what our campaign projects are, right? That's what AAF national competition is about. And then you go into the workforce, and it's all status meetings. I remember my first day on the job, I was like, so I'm not supposed to like pitch on all of my meetings. I don't have to ask for the business. And I was like, no, actually, just like tell them how you're doing. So understanding that, I feel like would have helped my mental health quite a bit, because once again, it's setting expectations. I went in and it was all status meetings, and I said, whoa, I chose the wrong major. This is not what I wanted. When really I chose the right one, I just needed to wait it out more. So being patient. But the street smarts piece is so important, and it comes down to understanding humans, listening to humans, and then also just like spreading the goodness of being good and like explaining your values and standing up for your values.
Be yourself.
Yeah,
Bring that light into the work.
I feel like not enough of us stand up for our values, and because of that, we just like keep pushing each other, right? But if it's like, no, don't push me, then you know not to push me, and then I know not to push you.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I think the things that we're taught in school, not everywhere, of course, but I think it does tend toward a certain type of brand planning work, Super Bowl spots, like 360 campaigns that we think of, and the reality of like what we actually work on, both from like a day-to-day perspective of like meetings and stuff like that, but also just like output as well. Like maybe, yeah, you're not going to work on like super sexy brands right away or ever, you know, maybe it doesn't mean you're not doing really amazing work, but I think it is important for people to understand that like what they actually work on in their career might be very different from like what they thought it was going to be when they were in school, and just be, not that that's any like shouldn't dissuade anyone from like starting a career in advertising, but that you just are realistic about like the work that you're going to do, and it's going to be amazing, and there's no reason why you can't advance and grow and do really amazing work in that context.
And all the work matters really, because even the littlest thing makes a difference in the client's perspective. So always think about the client, the people paying for this, you know, to paying for you to get your talent. So how can you contribute even in the smallest project, you know, whether it's going on TV or it's just a flyer. I think there's an opportunity for you as a junior to be under the radar and to really learn some skills, because once you're you know, doing major campaigns and national campaigns, and there's no room to make any mistakes, but you can certainly make mistakes if you're doing a flyer. So that gets you ready for what's to come. But another thing I wanna point out is regarding the hours, because that was something that I was like, whoa, it takes 6 months to do one basic thing, and the thing is that it's not wrong, but it's not right either, because we are taught in school, like you get a brief and you work hard for like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, and then you're done, and you put it out there and you get that satisfaction of having it done. When in the agency world, that's not really in their benefit, because they function as for billings. They do billing, so it's per hour, and the longer it is, the more hours, the more money everyone makes. So at the end of the day, I would debate whether it's in the business, we're in the business of creativity when it's actually in the business of hours. So that was something I had to come to terms with, because as creatives, you want to create and you want to see your work out there, but as an agency, they want to make money, so they stretch it out. So your job as a creative is to understand that, not try to change it. It is what it is, and create other type of work that you do on the side for yourself that fuels that creativity until you get to a place where you can do the projects that you really want. Because at the beginning, it's not going to be like the exciting stuff. Maybe it will if you're lucky, but if you don't feel like that's the work that you're doing is fueling your creativity, then you have to do something on the side for you.
Yeah, and I will say, so people typically come to me because they're miserable. They're like, I hate my job, I hate my boss, what am I doing with my life, help me get out of this. Usually it's like junior level, where they're like, this is not what I thought. Usually when they're fine there, they get through the work, they're finally on the clients they're working on, and they're suddenly supposed to be a supervisor or manager. And that's something that I don't feel like we prepare each other enough for, especially on the creative side. You chose to be a creative because you want to do the work, and then suddenly you have to manage people and you're not doing the work. And managing people, you really, a split second, can influence someone's life and their family and whether or not they have a job. And that's something that I was not prepared for, and I wish I knew. Is I thought, oh, if I have like a big title, like that's great pay, it's awesome. I don't have, like, that's what I've achieved. But no one told me that you get paid more because you're going to have to carry the emotional burden of your entire team. You'll be privy to things that no one else is privy to, which is really going to, that's when you really have to have mental health and an emotional strength.
That's a huge disconnect in the industry. It's like, because you're a great creative, you can be a creative director and then an ECD and manage the entire team, but like, you could be the best creative that is the worst manager ever. And your job is to not try to fit in and get bitter and get like nasty, you know, and try to do this job that you don't actually want. So if you are the most amazing designer or art director, and that's what you want to do, then you should go to talk to your manager and be like, I don't want to be a manager. I want more money because I'm the best at what I do. And you can make more money than the creative director who has to manage people because you're so good at what I do. Just because you're not a creative director does not mean you're not amazing at what you do and much, much, much happier. You can be making a lot more money without having to manage anybody. So take off that idea, if you're creative, that you have to be a creative director. If you're not a leader, if you don't have that fire within you, you're not an extrovert, a leader, a compassionate human, then you don't want to be a creative director. You just want to do well at your copywriting or your art direction and make a shit ton of money and keep making art and not ruin your career by having to manage people and leave your art away. We need your art, so stick to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it all keeps tying back to like self-awareness of like what your expectations are for your career and understanding that the path that other people take might not be the one that is right for you, and that's really okay. I want to talk about rejection. Advertising involves a rejection, be it from, a recruiter during a job search, most of the times, or, a creative director during a review after you've worked really long hours to bring these ideas to the table, and they get rejected. Jocelyn, how can those looking for a job remain motivated despite sometimes, multiple no's from agencies?
Yeah. So a no is always a blessing. It's a no because it's not a match mutually. And you always want it to be a mutual match, especially in a place like advertising where our emotions are invested, right? If your emotions are invested, you're basically entering into a relationship. So it better be mutual. So I would say if you're getting rejections, see that as a positive. It's hard to see that in the moment, but every rejection I've received, I look back now, I'm like, thank goodness that was a rejection. I'm glad I didn't end up there. What I do see often though is when people are rejected, they try the same thing over and over again, and they start reeking of desperation. Once you smell of desperation, everyone will start telling everyone, like the recruiters all know each other, creative directors all know each other. They'll say, don't reach out to this person. They're just like way too desperate. And you start devaluing yourself. So when you see constant rejection rather than trying the same thing, I always encourage everyone to become creative around what are some other solutions that there might be. Maybe you're not meant for the ad agency world, which is totally fine. We don't talk about that enough. Brand side, product side, startup. Like these are great places that we just don't shine our light on because we're too ego-driven as an ad industry. So we just need to look, I always encourage everyone, look at creative solutions. Ad agencies are not the only answer. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Mariam, how can junior talent start to build that creative resilience that I think you need to sort of make it through a career in advertising?
Well, I think like to add to what Jocelyn said, it is a blessing when you get a no. Think about it this way. If an agency doesn't want you, why do you want them?
And why would you want to convince them to take you?
Right. It's kind of like going into a relationship with somebody that you swipe left. Like it's a no. So like, why would you want to go there? So watch that behavior and just be like, okay, well, if they don't want me, that means I don't want them either. They don't want me. But your job actually, this is when it gets tricky. If you're trying to put on a persona, right, or a mask that is not really who you are because you're thinking, oh, I read this, I scanned through the job description, and I'm gonna like try to fit in to give them what they want. They can sense that. They can smell it's energy. They can sense that. So you're not really showing who you are, and then when they reject you, you're kind of disappointed because they didn't really get to see who you really are. So my advice to you is to show up to a job interview or on the phone interview, whatever it is, fully yourself. Show them who you are, truly. Don't hold back. Be yourself, because you want to find a team that really wants you for you, and not a team that can be like, oh, I like how they are when you're acting, and then 6 months in, you're trying to be yourself, and they're like, well, we didn't hire you like this, like you changed or whatnot. So make sure that you always show up as yourself, not trying to fit in the job description. Those descriptions are copy-paste from like so many things. When recruiters look for people, they look for personalities, right? They look for personalities, people who they can like mesh with, make sure that the team can like mesh with also, and like they're looking for somebody who can add value. So your value is you. So if you're not being you, then where is the creativity in that? Then you're just acting. So next time you get rejected, ask yourself, and you can always ask for feedback. Maybe they have specific feedback that can really benefit you. Always ask for feedback. And when you get rejected, just ask yourself, was I fully myself? What did I not show them who I am? Or hey, I showed them myself, and thank God they said no, because clearly they can't handle me, and that's okay, because you don't want to be with them either.
Yeah, and handling rejection with grace is so important, because it doesn't happen enough. And so often I tell a candidate, hey, we're going with someone else, and I get this scathing email back. It's like, well, in that case, that just solidified that that person is not right for this company. Right. But the candidates who are very gracious back, I remember them. People remember them. And we will all grow and improve in our lives and in our craft. So just because it's not a fit right now doesn't mean 6 months down the line, I won't reach out. So understanding how and practicing taking rejection with grace is also key.
I hear that so much from different recruiters, that really, like, most of the time it's like a timing perspective. I mean, of course, there are certain situations where it's just not the right fit, but sometimes it's just the time. And it doesn't mean that, like, one of our podcast guests said it in the past too, is like a no in the context of job hunting and stuff, a no doesn't mean like no forever, right? Like, especially if you are really, wanting to work at a certain place. So yeah, I think, and if anyone like watching, like, because I think like this idea of like dealing with rejection, we all go through it. Like, I know at the beginning of your career when you're trying to find your first job or internship. So if you have any tips on like how you have dealt with it that you want to share, like, put it in the chat, because I think it's valuable, because in the moment it just feels like so personal and awful, and that there's that reality to acknowledge as well. But we all move past it, and like Jocelyn said, are better for the no's when you look back in hindsight. So will you touch a little bit about burnout, Jocelyn? I wanted to dig in a little bit more around the idea specifically of burnout, and what really, in your own experience, led to situations of burnout, and how you handled it. Maybe we can start with Mariam. I know, Jocelyn, you gave us a little teaser.
Sure.
Yeah.
So a situation when I experienced burnout, I mean, like I was telling you earlier, just working long hours and having to deal with personal feedback and all that I very much internalized, and I didn't speak for myself. I kept all those things within, try to hold it together, and eventually that led to burnout, and it was kind of self-inflicted, like you said. Hindsight is 2020. When I was in it, I was like, no, this sucks. Like, it wasn't all about me. But then I realized, like, well, what am I doing to help myself in this situation? You know what I mean? So it's like I was so focused on having them change so that I can feel better, not realizing that I can change my situation by myself. So instead of sitting there and feeling sorry for myself, and of course the burnout led to anxiety and depression and all kinds of things, I decided that, okay, I'm gonna take action. And the first action I took was, okay, I'm gonna use my insurance to get a therapist 2 blocks away from the agency, just so I can have like direct access. And in that first step, when you're feeling so low, you do want to get a therapist, because you first want to like unpack and just get it out of your system. You don't want to go straight to like just, oh, I'm going to go just feel zen and do better. Like, you want to get it out first, and then you can find those tools that are going to help you stay afloat. So for me, it was okay, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm gonna get that out of my system. Started to feel better. I'm gonna start, making plans at night so I can have a life, because that was on me. I was the one who decided, like, okay, I guess I have to stay here. No one told me you have to stay. I just told myself. So I started changing those patterns within myself, and realized that most people are just going to follow. With if I say I need to go home and do this, then that's it. That's it, right? They kind of let me be. And so really it started by me deciding, okay, how can I support myself instead of waiting for other people to to get me out of this, and how can I set my boundaries? And it starts by asking yourself, what do you need? You know, and it goes back to self-care. Self-care is giving yourself what you need at any given time. And that's self-care is survival. It's not like, it's not something nice that you do to pamper yourself. It's your survival. And so as a creative and a creator, anybody who works in advertising to me is a creator. You're in a creative industry. If you're burnt out, you have nothing to give, there goes your creativity, there goes your career. So it's very, very important that you put your mental health, your physical health, your soul health, spirit health, all of the health, put them up front, and that should not be shakable by anything. Of course, every now and then you have to like take one for the team and jump in and help, but you do it from a place of love, not of anger or of like resentment. Then when you feel yourself all the time, then you realize, oh, actually I have more to give, and I'm happy to stay extra couple hours and help my team because you have a different perspective. You're not drained anymore. You already filled yourself the day before in whatever tools that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From my perspective, having heard a lot of people of when they're burnt out, typically what I find is our biggest strength is also our biggest weakness. So we all somehow made it into advertising because we're hyper competitive and we're hyper driven. Like that's our two strengths amongst every single person in advertising. But those are also our biggest weaknesses because typically we go into hyperdrive on competitiveness. So we work ourselves even more to become the best of the very best, to get to the #1 agency in the entire world as a director, as a chief, whatever. And that ultimately, what I've seen is what drives burnout, is when we actually have enough, but because of our biggest strength, that becomes our weakness. And we say, nope, this title isn't enough. Nope, working on this client isn't enough. I want more, I want more, I want more because I'm competitive and I'm going to work hard at it. So I found that it is typically self-inflicted. So understanding our biggest strength and protecting that and telling yourself to stop is very difficult. But if we're able to do that and practice it, I think we'll find more long-term happiness and joy in everything. My burnout was all self-inflicted of, oh, I have to work more to get to this title, to get to this salary because I want to be the youngest director making the highest money, which I got all of that, experienced it, and I was like, I'm not happier.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth it.
Like, what's your priority, right? Like, so in that time for you, your priority was the title, but then you haven't like looked at what that title is going to bring with it. Right. What's the cost?
Yes.
So you kind of have to prioritize yourself, even though now as a junior, you're so passionate, you want to get into the industry and you have all this passion to give, but that passion will run out in like a year or two. Believe me, if you go on overdrive. So your job is to make sure that passion is protected. You make sure that fire is lit all the time, and you make sure it's being nurtured and taken care of, because agencies are not going to do that for you. They just don't have any resources to do that as of now, from what I know. And not to say that this is all on you. A lot of it is on the agency right now, but right now you're here and I'm talking to you, so I want to have you take responsibility for that, because there's so much that the agency can do, but the fact is it's not happening. So what can you do in the meantime to take care of yourself? And it's you deciding, my health is my priority, period, the end, and move from there.
I love the visual of like the fire, protecting the fire. I think that's like a really great way to think about burnout, and I mean literal burnout and self-care. Yeah, I think that's a really great visual to keep in mind, because it's so easy for these things to become like a little bit more nebulous and be about like thinking about this industry with so much passion and drive and like desire to do a really amazing work. Like, how do I protect that? Because that really, at the end of the day, is what contributes to longevity in a career. To be able to work in advertising for like your whole career and not feel like, oh, I need to like figure it out next. Not that that's wrong either, but all right. So last question. What are some personal self-care techniques that you use that you would recommend to other people? I mean, self-care we've defined as much bigger than just going a day or a massage. What are some little things that the audience can take away that they can do?
I used to never schedule my vacations out in advance. because I'm just a spontaneous planner. I'm like, oh, there's a cheap flight, I'll go. But starting like 3 years ago, I mandated myself to take vacation. So I book it in advance and require myself to take it. At a certain point, I had 2 phones. I had my work phone and my personal phone, and I turn off my work phone on the weekends. There are a lot of different techniques. But for me, what really worked was protecting those vacation days. Another one, and it might sound like frou-frou, I was very against love life. I value it. I'm a married woman now, but I was just such a career-driven person, and part of it is I think like double minority, right? So Asian woman in advertising, I wanted to be the one Asian American woman who made it to this level, to be recognized. And so I said, nothing else will distract me from it, and I did not put love life as a priority. Thank goodness it spontaneously worked for me. I met a wonderful person. We're married now, but in practicing that relationship and caring for that relationship, it actually helped me with my career relationship, because I had to say, okay, I have to put a pause on this. I'm not checking email when I'm on vacation because I want to spend time with my loved one. So I also encourage all like super career-driven people. Career is absolutely important, but also make time for love life, and romance.
Definitely. That's a good one. Basically, have a life. Like,
yeah,
the advertising agency that you're at is not your life. It will never be your life. You're gonna switch a billion times, and you're gonna forget and realize, why did I do that? So to save you some time, just go ahead and have a life. That life is gonna fuel your creativity in so many ways, and gonna open up so many doors, and you're gonna feel happier and bring more joy into the workplace, more humanity, which is so needed. But as far as like specific self-care practice, so again, like I said earlier, self-care is giving yourself what you need at any given time. So only you know what you need, and you kind of have to get used to asking yourself that question and investigating, like, what is it that I need to be more creative? And for me personally, at that time when I was going through the burnout and whatnot, I needed to move. I needed to meditate. I needed to be outside. I needed to feel the sun. I needed to go to yoga. Those are things that really helped raise my vibrations, and was such an instant thing that I needed to do it multiple times a day. So I would schedule like 10 minutes, like 4 or 5 times a day throughout the day, where my phone rings and I would just go outside, go to the park. Thankfully, I was near a park, or even just go outside. This is like in Manhattan, still crazy, but I would just go to a park, put my headphones, and meditate for like 5 minutes. And what that does is just helps me like bring all my energy back to myself, instead of like being so overwhelmed with everything that's happening, because at some point, when burnout happens, you get so overwhelmed with everything and you get anxious. So that helped me with my anxiety. And I would do it like 4 or 5 times a day. I don't even talk to anybody. I don't ask anybody. I just disappear, take my time, and do that. And I would also schedule at least 3 times a week things that I'm doing that night. That way I don't keep it open for, can you work at night? It's like, nope. I have plans. I have my yoga. I have my this. But as far as self-care, you have to investigate what makes you happy. If that's travel, you gotta travel. If that's writing, you gotta write. If that's hanging out with your friends, that's what you have to do, and do it at least 3 times a week, and at least something that you can do at work at least twice a day. That's your practice. You have to practice. This is not something that just you don't bring it when it's too late. When you bring self-care, it's too late. It becomes like damage control, not really self-care. But self-care is preventing, helps you prevent the things to happen. So it is a practice. It's not something you do once a day. You have to do it consistently in order to see the long-lasting results. So don't put yourself first, and do it consistently.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with its practice. One thing that I always do, and I tell all the new hires that I work with to do, is don't stay past 5 p.m. starting your first day. Like, that second you do that, people expect you to be past 5 p.m. So set your own boundaries up front. Also, when we're burnt out, it can be so overwhelming, and sometimes it's like we can't add to things. We need to instead remove things and simplify. So this sounds so silly, but I feel like in the ad world, it's always like, what cool outfit are you wearing? What cool shoes are you wearing? What cool Apple Watch do you have? And like being able to not care about that is so healthy because you focus on yourself. Mm-hmm. So for me, I found myself being like, nope, not going to buy those shoes because I truly don't need it. Like, and having that self-control helps control everything else. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that helped me a lot is I think in the ad industry, it's like we're all exhausted after 7 p.m. Like, let's go have a drink and bitch about work. Cut that out. Like, get drinks, but don't bitch about work. Don't ask how work is. Don't talk about work. Ask about other things. So sometimes by removing stuff, it can be easier to get out of that burnout because it can be so overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you're feeling great and you want to go have, you're not burned out or anything, you want to go have drinks with your supervisor and your team, like that's fine. But we do then in industry too. Like every night there's drinks and every night is like
we only bitch about work.
It's like bitching and venting party. And what that does is bring you further down than you already are. And you repeat again, Groundhog Day, another burnout, another, like you feel like you're in an alternate universe and I've been there. So you really have to be like, no alcohol for me, no drinking. I need to go home and like rest and do something that nurtures you and not something that drains you further. You have to be relentless about that because I know how easy it is to be like, oh my God, let's just drink it and like go dancing and that's fine. You can probably do that in like the first 5 years of your career, like up until you're 25, 26, and then you're gonna be like, I can't even do this anymore. Like, it's gonna kick in eventually. So.
And I will say, like my glass of wine after work, and
a glass of wine. I'm talking about like going like drinking and like
I also make it a rule, like, okay, I'm gonna bitch for 5 minutes, but after that, like stop me.
Yeah.
So it's like get it out and then move on.
Have an accountability partner. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Find somebody who feels just like you and hold yourself accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really easy. That swirl, I think, is something we also don't talk about. Aren't going super well in the agency or life or whatever. It's easy to continually talk about it and with other people and in the agency. And like when that becomes like all you're talking about every day, like it does, like Mariam said, it just exacerbates like how you're feeling about it. Like certainly you should acknowledge it and communicate it to people who, need to know earlier. But I think there is a limit to how helpful it is when we just like talk about the same issues like over and over again.
Look for solutions, not compassion. Find solutions together. Don't just feel sorry for each other. It doesn't solve anything.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take a couple questions to wrap up that got left in the question tab. Sending it. So the first one is from Dana. He said, how can learning and development and HR teams teach managers to be coaches and encourage openness around mental health? She works in the learning and development field at an agency. So a little bit different perspective on like, how agency side can influence, how managers are dealing with mental health.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of agencies train their managers on it, but it doesn't come from a culture standpoint. It comes more from, okay, we have a problem, you need to get trained on it, and hopefully when you're trained, you should be a better manager. But really, I think it has to come from the culture. The culture itself has to be inclusive and open and transparent for all these trainings to work. Because these trainings are expensive, and I see companies put money in it, but I've really actually never seen any of them work out well because it doesn't come from the heart of the agency. There has to be a change in heart for the trainings to work. Mm-hmm. So I would address that culture piece first.
I would say encourage your everyone in the agency to be vulnerable and just to be open about what they're going through. Like let's say the CEO sends an email and says, "I'm not going to be here today. I'm taking a mental health day." That's like casual, but also opens up so much for everybody to be like, okay, we can talk about this. So it doesn't have to be in this like super formal, like let's all meet and we're going to start talking about mental health because we care about you. That's not authentic. It has to be like real. Like the people in charge have to like step forward and be those first people to establish that rule and not just tell them what they should do, right? And on the flip side of the coin, juniors, as you're coming into the agency, you have to understand your role in the agency. You're the freshness. You're the freshness, whether they treat you like that or not. But you are. That's where all your ideas come from. Like all the ideas of the agency come from you. You bring that excitement, you bring that passion. So you kind of have to, as a collective of juniors, you have to decide, this is what we're okay with, this is what we're not okay with, and just go ahead and request what you need. You have the power to make so much change, because people at the top are already so used to the status quo, but you're fresh, you have fresh ideas, so you can establish a new status quo for the entire agency. And if you show up and be vulnerable and be open and be yourself, that's gonna encourage so many others who missed that boat, you know, to like finally like open up. So it kind of works both ways. The juniors and the very people at the top have to just be vulnerable, just open up and start having these conversations.
Yeah, and I think there's also,
Go ahead.
I think there's also just like so much, often we forget that our managers also need help.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's so powerful for a junior person to come in and be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. But also it's really powerful to be like, hey manager, how are you doing?
Right.
Because if the manager then opens up, then you can really have a genuine conversation. So we have to help each other. It's not just like junior people should expect, you know, the managers to help you. Sometimes the junior people are actually the role model for the next generation of managers and managing up. We teach our managers on how to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it comes down to being human. Just be human. Just be yourself. Like this whole thing, if you want to take away anything from this talk, is just be yourself. Like, it's okay, you know? It's safe to be yourself, you know? And it should be safe. You should be practicing being yourself at work, in the world, anywhere. It's okay to be yourself and to ask for things that are not necessarily given in that environment, because you're making so many changes for so many people, you don't even realize it.
Also, I learned that if you ask for something, you'll usually get it.
Yeah.
And you have to have the courage to ask for something. You have to be yourself.
Exactly.
I'm such a huge advocate for like junior talent really having a role in changing the way that the agency scene is and the industry is. So I think those are both really, really salient points. The leading, I think, is such a smart way to approach it as well, and creating an environment of openness where it can kind of happen like a little bit more organically rather than going into like a auditorium where there's like a presenter coming from outside of the agency and doesn't understand the context and stuff. So
start implementing it from within.
All right, so this next question has like multiple parts, but essentially Olivia asks, like, how do you balance your mental health around kind of these like sweatshops? We talked about agencies like not really necessarily being set up from a structure perspective to support mental health while trying to advance your career. She says, I'm currently in a place that is the healthiest place I've ever been, but she doesn't feel like she's going to be able to grow her career at like the right rate or the rate that she wants to grow. So she was wondering, like, should she stay or go and chance it somewhere else? So I guess like the situation is like the mental health environment is like good, but maybe at the expense of like her rate of growth. What would you guys say to that?
This is a very interesting question because let me I'm looking at your question right now, Olivia. Let me just, because there's 3 parts.
There's multiple parts, yeah.
I'm currently in a place that is the healthiest place I've ever been, but I'm not going to be able to monetarily grow at an attractive rate. So I guess my question to you is that are you so set up that growth means being in a sweatshop or like making more money, have to work hard? That idea, is that what you're functioning from? Right? So that's a question for you just to think about. Like, I have to work so hard in order to make money, or like when things are so easy and simple, I'm not growing. That's a disconnect, because for me, when things are healthy and easy and simpler, I'm growing more actually than growing the hard way. So that may be like some sort of like unconscious programming in your mind that's telling you like you have to be in the sweatshops in order to grow or make more money. And maybe that's what the industry is telling you, but you have to look within and say, what do I need? If you like to be in a competitive sweatshoppy environment, that's on you. But when you go there, you should not complain about it. Just go and do it and own it. and love it.
Yeah.
But if being in a healthy place is like confusing to you, it might be just you just need an adjustment period, because you're almost like you're suffering from like PTSD from the previous sweatshops, and you're like, well, this is too easy. That must be too good to be true, right? But ultimately, it comes down to your decision. Do you feel? I mean, definitely look at that unconscious thoughts that's going on, and then give yourself at least a year there and see, before you judge. See if they're gonna help you grow. Ask for a raise. See if they're gonna give it to you. You just gonna ask for it. It's not. You feel like it's not going to be, but that's not a fact, right? So you kind of have to go all the way and see if this real, or am I just too used to the sweatshops and now I'm feeling weird in this new healthy place? So play with that a little bit.
Yeah, we have our whole lives to work. I don't think, like, if I could do my career over again and prevent burnout, it would be to slow down and enjoy the luxury of having enough. And there are also times and moments for everything. There are times when we only have to run on that treadmill at a rate of 3. And then other moments where it's like, okay, I got to go to boot camp, so then I can get on to that next stage in life. So figure out what stage in life that is. On the monetary front, I always feel like it's more positioned in a better mindset to say, hey, I don't feel like I'm growing here. What type of opportunities, or this is what I'd like to be able to do. How can you help me get there, manager? And then once you start getting or start agreeing to those responsibilities, then you have the financial discussion of if you're going to get compensated. Now, if you enter in of, I want more money, they're going to ask, what is the exchange, right? So you want to focus it more on you and your career and growing, and then that financial piece backs it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And your last question was, how do you convince yourself of your worth? That's some self-love and self-care that you need to give yourself. I use affirmations. So it's literally, if you don't believe it, if right now I tell you, you're an amazing creative or you're an amazing professional, you bring so much value into the workplace, you're so needed, your team loves you, and you don't believe it within you, then you kind of have to talk to yourself until you start to believe it. So that's when it's like fake it till you make it type of thing, because you have to know your worth. If you don't know your worth, no one else will. No one else.
And I think having an accountability partner helps too, because they're not sucked into that craziness. One thing that my husband he doesn't work in advertising, so he looks at us and he's like, what's going on? But one thing that he's taught me that has worked so well is I used to always question my decisions, right? Because we're in the industry where your idea is not going to be the best unless everyone fights over it and it survives. So we have to be okay with our decisions. And I've learned that if I'm okay with my decisions and the consequences of it, I feel like I'm truly valuing myself. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that until I was like swirling with my thoughts and being like, oh, I made this decision, but it impacts this person. And Levi's like, my husband, he's like, just like own your decision. Like, why are you thinking what you could have done? You already made the decision, own it and make the best of it. Yeah. He's like, you're going to make the right decision because you're worth it and you're of value. So sometimes you need that other person to be like, dude, stop complaining. Just like, go with it. You made the decision, own it, make it awesome.
Totally. And get somebody you trust to tell you how good you are, if you can't believe it for yourself. But ultimately, you kind of have to talk yourself into it, use affirmations, use whatever you need to use to get yourself to believe in your own greatness, because you are. And if you're functioning from a place that, okay, I'm not great, then that's what you're projecting, and then there's nowhere to go from there.
That also comes from like knowing what your purpose is in life other than work. Like I've had those days where I was like, my purpose in life is to go to work. And it was hard. But then when you find like a bigger purpose, maybe it's like helping people get out of their ruts at work, right? Or everyone's miserable. You're going to be more effusive, so you're going to spread the joy. Or, I did a coworker's hair one day, and she just like completely became a different person to me. And it was awesome. And it was like woman to woman, like self-care.
Yeah.
So finding a
it comes down to that humanity.
Yeah. It's like work isn't just work. There's a bigger purpose. It's different to each of us. Right. We just have to figure out what it is for all of us and each of us.
Right. Hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. We're getting right to the end of our time. Mariam and Jocelyn, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing so openly with you if they want to connect or just see what you're up to.
Do you want to give your details?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Mariam Mona. Maybe I'll type it in the chat. Mariam Mona. So you can just follow me there. You can also follow I See You Well. My business is all about self-care and accessible wellness and tools to help you during this time, because believe it or not, there's a lot of transformation going in the world right now, and no matter what industry you are, you need a lot of support, and you need to really establish those self-care practices. We can no longer hide anymore. So if you're looking for any affirmations or advice, you can follow me at I See You Well on Instagram, or icuwellness.com is my website.
Cool. And I will type mine as well. Sorry. I am Jocelyn S. Lai on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then my website, I'll type it here, is www.jsltalent.com. And my email's on there.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you everyone who was watching, and hello to everyone who's going to watch this afterwards. The video will be available. And thank you to our guests. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.